hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mango Publishing Heart Wisdom panel. I'm Sherry Richert Belul, author of Say It Now, 33 Creative Ways to Say I Love You to the most important people in your life. And I am so excited about this conversation. Apologies to anyone who tried to join us a couple of weeks ago for the same conversation. We had some technological issues, but we have Karen Anderson and Farrah Alexander back with us. And as we were saying before we went live, our topic is on shame resilience. And this moment in time is probably an even better one to be having this conversation. So in some ways, it may have just been divine intervention. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is have our two wonderful authors introduce themselves and tell us, what's been top of your mind around your work. And we'll start with you, Farrah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Farrah Alexander. My first book is Raising the Resistance, A Mother's Guide to Practical Activism. And I just came out with a second book very recently about activism in Kentucky, which is called Resistance in the Bluegrass, Empowering the Commonwealth. And so throughout my journey, I have become a little bit more involved in activism, and in reflecting in that, I found for me personally that I thought the law was the most effective way to make change. And so I actually just started law school this past year. And yeah, so that's been very, very interesting for me. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And it's been a very wild time.
Wow, so you just started law school?
Yes, I just finished my first year.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm visualizing.
High five.
Thank you.
I know. I'm visualizing you on the Supreme Court. Okay, Farrah?
Oh my gosh.
No
what
pressure.
A wild time that would be. Yeah, no pressure. No pressure. Appreciate it.
Hey, Karen, welcome back. Hello.
Thank you. So when you asked me if I wanted to do another one of these, I was in the midst of finishing or sort of in the midst of an advanced certification in feminist coaching, and was also thinking about what my final project I wanted my final project for that to be. And given my work in the world, and I guess I always forget to introduce myself. My name is Karen C.L. Anderson, and I am the author of 3 Mango books, including Difficult Mothers, Adult Daughters, A Guide for Separation, Liberation, and Inspiration, and sort of an accompanying workbook that goes with that, or a journal, and then also a journal on creativity. And shame has always been a fascinating subject for me personally, because it is something I have lived with for my whole life. And the more I have delved into it, and the impact that I've seen that it has on me and it has on women in general, has sort of led me to want to do more work in that area specifically. And so in sharing with Sherry something I had written, she asked me to read this. This is not from a book, but this is from part of the workshop that I created. Women have been socialized to believe there is something wrong with them and to feel shame. Oftentimes, these shaming messages come from our mothers, not because our mothers are bad people, but rather because they learned that shaming can be protective, a way to remain safe and connected to resources in a culture that, number one, doesn't value women equally, and number two, punishes women when they don't conform to the norms of said culture. It keeps us small and powerless and unable to create resources on our own. So in order to raise the resistance, we need to understand how shame works and how to work with it when we experience it. Difficult mother-daughter relationships don't happen in a vacuum. They often happen in the context of patriarchy, misogyny, and white supremacy. And this is why mothers will shame their daughters.
Well done.
I've heard that before, but wow.
Boom.
I know, right? That just stopped me in the gut all over again. Yeah, and Karen, what did you say right before we went live about like How long has it been that women have been sort of living in this shame?
Well, I'm not an expert, but the little research I've done says that it's about 6,000 years. And it sort of coincides with when humans started farming and having property, and as well as when men started to understand that they actually had something to do with women giving birth. Up until that point, men didn't know that they were an integral part of pregnancy, of having a baby, being able to have a baby. And so then once they realized that, then it was like all about control. I mean, and I'm like, this is a gross simplification. This is not like, I don't, there's probably much better history, but like the 6,000 years thing is, I mean, yeah, so we've been swimming in it. And I often, sort of joke and even though this seems like such a heavy subject, I try to bring levity to it because we have to. But thanks to work from people like Brene Brown, who have been talking more and more about shame, I think it's imperative that we are able to look at it and not hide from it, because it is such a corrosive emotion. It can cause so much repression and oppression. It is a tool, and so the more we can talk about it and have it be part of normal conversation, like you said when we were before starting, nobody wants to admit that they feel shame, and you said this is like nobody wants to admit that they are racist, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like we all carry it.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in it. It's like,
yeah,
it's just part of the water we swim in.
Farrah, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, I mean, some of the history that you just said, Karen, kind of blew my mind. I never thought about that before, but I really like what you said, Karen, about things like shame being rooted in some of these oppressive systems that we have, like patriarchy. And when you really attack those bigger issues, we all benefit in so many ways. And so I thought that was really powerful. And I'm glad that you said that, Karen.
Before we went live, for those of you who weren't with us back then, it seemed like there were probably about 25 different directions we could go to start this conversation to delve in. So I think I'm just going to turn to Karen or Farrah. Do you have a sort of an intuitive sense about like where do you want to start right now?
Well, I have some things that I can read. I wanted to sort of share some of the definitions of shame, and just so that we can sort of understand, sort of the current thinking about shame. So I have, these are quotes or, bits from a lot of different people, but the painful sensation that as shame comes from the belief that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. And it's different from guilt, because guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is I am wrong. I am bad. Shame creates a barrier around our experience and our truth. It leaves us unable to see ourselves clearly, to feel for ourselves, and to believe in ourselves. Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a leading trauma practitioner, says that shame is the loss of connection to self. So in shame, we lose connection to our bodies. One of the early researchers in shame is somebody named Gershon Kaufman, and he said that shame is the breaking of the interpersonal bridge. And of course, Brene Brown says shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that you are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging, which speaks to that 6,000 years ago right? That if you aren't conforming, you will be kicked out and you will die. And that lives within us still, right? That's why we're so terrified of it. Shame is a combination of an emotion and a trauma response. Shame is so painful that it can cause us to fight, freeze, or, run away. I mean, that's like, it can be that painful that it creates that sort of survival response in us. And supremacy culture begets shame where there shouldn't be shame. So much, sometimes people are like, oh, well, they should be ashamed of themselves, or that's shameful. And I mean, people like Brene Brown and others, I think it's really important to sort of question how or if or why we are shaming someone else. And is it really going to get us what we want? Is it really effective? Because it's a lot easier to shame than it is to hold somebody accountable.
Ooh. Another mic drop right there, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Again, I mean, I think Brene Brown says it too. Yeah. So it's not like I didn't make it up, but yeah.
What's coming up for me, Karen? I had pulled a quote from your book that said, guilt, shame, and hopelessness are the reason we can't, won't set boundaries with our mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And that just dropped in for me, and maybe boundaries in general, but you guys do want to say a little bit more about that? Because we had talked before about like that this is a piece of it, right? That it's like the shame and the boundaries are connected so deeply.
You go ahead, Farrah.
Oh, I kind of thought you had something more powerful to say about boundaries. Well, yeah, I agree. I think that it's important for everyone to recognize their own boundaries and be brave enough to set them, because that's not something that's easy to do. But I think it's definitely necessary. And I do have something that I can read to, shame is something that is involved in so much of our work. And one thing, I write about motherhood and political activism. And as a mother, I was kind of confronted with shame in a lot of ways that I didn't quite expect. But I also kind of had to come to the realization that, like, you're going to make decisions. As a mother, you have to make decisions. And no matter what your decisions are, someone out there is going to disagree with decisions and find them shameful. And so you really kind of have to accept that and move on from that in some way. So maybe set a boundary that, try so you can be effective and like live your life and not let all of this shame from other people hinder your own progress in your life. So one thing that I wrote was about respecting the choices of other women. And it says, as a mother, you're faced with too many choices to make. If you're carrying a baby, you must decide everything from whether to drink caffeine, to finding out the sex of the baby, to what kind of birth you'd like to have. If you're an adoptive parent, you may choose whether you want an open or closed adoption, or you'll pursue domestic or international adoption. No parent is immune from making tough decisions about how they'll parent. And then once the kid is earthside within your family, you have a myriad of choices to make while you navigate the mind-blowing notion of having a new little human under your care. You'll choose whether to breast or formula feed, to work outside the home or stay at home, and how to discipline your child. And the one constant is that no matter what you choose, someone will hoist on their judgy pants, ready to tell you how wrong you are. And women and mothers are badasses. We intensely care, love, and want what's best for our babies. And sometimes we don't innately know what's best, so we research and learn more until we found the perfect fit for our families. And we feel pretty good about our decisions. But then another mother faces the same decision and approaches it with care and love, with the same goal of choosing the best option for their family, but she chooses something different. And instead of two mothers recognizing that, first of all, motherhood is really freaking hard and there's no easy task to make these decisions, or that they're both coming from the same place of love and wanting what's best for their children, they flail around arguing why their decision is best and why mothers making opposite decisions are just wrong, wrong, wrong. And this absurd phenomenon is known among mothers as the mommy wars. And it's detrimental not only to mothers, but to women and feminism in general, because just explaining it to you now makes me feel dumber for it. But we must discuss it because you will kill many more brain cells if you enlist yourself in it. Take breastfeeding, a fiery hot topic for mommy war soldiers everywhere. In general, the phrase breast is best is considered the gospel truth, but in reality, breast may or may not be best, and it's a highly individual choice. And so often the topics that divide mothers the most deal with issues of bodily autonomy, infant feeding, pain management during labor and delivery, when and if to have children at all, and so on. And a mother's body does not cease to become her own just because she can carry, birth, and nourish a child. And so what's so silly about this dynamic of mothers judging and shaming one another is not only does it hurt women, like most forms of misogyny, it's pointless. No mother gets a trophy for enduring unmedicated childbirth, and no mother is more of a mother than another. Neither mothers nor their children benefit from Judgy McJudgerton supermoms criticizing their parenting. The truth is, none of these battles matter. In several short years, all your kids will be hopelessly weird and eating chicken nuggets they rescued from between the couch cushions. So refuse to participate in the mommy wars. Another mother's choices are not an attack on your choices. Parenting is damn hard, and it serves none of us to make it harder by judging another mother's choices.
Oh,
yes. As somebody who chose not to have children.
Yes, right. Absolutely. And that is your choice, which should be respected and is very personal. Absolutely.
Farrah, I'm so glad that you took us there, because as we talked about before we started, that was another place, like, I wanted to make sure that we touched on that it's not just coming from, the patriarchy, but that, as you point out so well in your book, that it's like how often women are shaming one another. And you have a beautiful whole other piece in your book that I really loved, where you were encouraging us, right, to really support one another. It's hard enough, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just curious if anybody who's here, there's so many places we could go. Does anyone here, do you have a personal interest in or a question for one of our authors around shame? Yeah, Kate, there you go.
Well, one of the issues, of course, has come up with shaming motherhood, sexuality, and women is the overturning of Roe v. Wade last Friday. And, I'm past the childbearing age, and of course, it does not affect me specifically. But I felt such a great sense of loss and grief and pain. And I noticed that it triggered what it felt in me was old neuroses. And I felt like, oh my God, I'm going back to the way I felt when I was 20, before I had a better sense of self. And it was very weird because it was almost exactly that feeling. And I realized it was triggering a very young sense of shame that's still in me, even though through all my years in therapy and mothering and professional success, it's there, it's still there. And what surfaced from that, and I could ask a question, is female sensuality, because that is so friggin' shameful to have the experience of sex and enjoy it. And I think that's part of what's going on, don't you?
Well, that's, that really speaks to, the original sort of topic, the headline of this whole thing, which is shame resilience, right?
Mm.
And I wanted to say that as far as I know, there is no way to avoid shame, and that's okay, right? I think maybe eventually humans will evolve to the point where we don't need it, but for now we have it. It's kind of like an appendix or something, right? Like it's so how I have learned to be more resilient with shame, because shame would shut me down to the point of not being able to speak. I sort of freeze and dissociate. And I mean, it's funny, I was actually remembering being on one of these panels and having shame come up, feeling it, and like losing myself in the moment. So it is with me. And so some of the things I have learned in terms of, first of all, being able to recognize it is huge, right? To say, oh my gosh, I am feeling shame. This is shame. This is what it feels like in my body. That's what I'm experiencing, is so powerful, because it takes it from this thing is happening to me and I don't know what it is, and except that it feels terrible, to, okay, that I can name it.
Mhm.
Right? So being able to recognize it and understand that it's been triggered in you is part of shame resilience. Right? Reaching out and being able to share it with people or someone who you feel safe with is part of shame resilience. Being able to say, you know what, I feel like a selfish, spoiled brat right now. Like that's one of my little shame. That's one of the thoughts that I have, is I'm selfish, spoiled brat. Another one is I'm bad. And another one is I'm a pathetic loser. These are the thoughts my brain offers me when I'm in shame.
Yeah.
And I can say them now, and I can say, yeah, this is what my brain tells me. This is what my brain says to me. And being able to say it like that is part of my shame resilience. So, I have several sort of practices for shame resilience. One of them is naming it, acknowledging it, noticing it. Another one is to interrupt the pattern physically, because pain has a physiology. It lives in our body. And I'm curious, maybe I'll just ask the people here, when you feel shamed, what does your body want to do? What does your body do?
Gets hot. Literally, my face gets hot.
Yeah.
And I think it might even flush, but I don't know. I'm not looking at myself.
Me too. It's like hot, prickly face is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to throw things and, become really angry and crazy and, throw that feeling away from me, because I was feeling wicked,
Oh,
evil, wicked,
Yes.
to be sexual.
A lot. Or go ahead, Jill.
Thank you so much, both of you, for bringing this up. And I had this experience just yesterday in a meeting where I was feeling really terrified. And I'm so grateful that you brought this up, Karen and Kate, because I froze. And then I thought, I need to interrupt this pattern. Like, that's the thing I need to do. And I thought of Brene Brown, because I thought, I'm freezing. And what do I need to do is what do I need to do to take care of myself? Well, first I felt like I wanted to run, right? And because I felt so scared. And I thought, no, like, how can I fetch myself here right now and really be loving to change the course of my forward history? Well, I think you know what I mean. And that's to change the pattern. And so I spoke up, because I was thinking of Brene Brown. She said, shame needs to be witnessed and it cannot survive empathy. And I was like, okay, this is going to be really scary, but that's the stand that I need to take for my heart and for myself so that I can change the lineage. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because and that's why I wanted to come here, last month or today or whenever it was juggled, because it's such a great pairing of words. And I love that. It's so fiercely woven together. And I just want to say thank you and share the time.
Oh, Jill, thank you.
I'm sweating.
Yeah.
Jill, thank you so much. Thank you. That was so valuable and so important. Yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, so the physiology of shame, right? Hot face, can't speak up. For a lot of people, myself included, it is literally feeling like a crumpling, like a forward sort of like, right?
Yes.
And so how do we interrupt? We can open up, right? Literally change your physiology. You can change your, like how you feel. I mean, not always, not immediately, but it's like, oh, I'm doing this. Let me do this. If it feels safe, if it's okay. It's also okay to, if you want to run away, right? Can you at least stand up and take a step? Can you honor your body's desire to do something without like having it be like you literally run out of the meeting, right? But like, can you honor the impulse in some way? So that's the second way that I teach shame resilience. Speaking it out loud to someone you trust, I already said that. Rebuilding your dignity, honor, and integrity, right? Like, and this is something I read there's a book by Dr. Mario Martinez, and I can't remember the name of the book right now, but he talks about, we have to remind ourselves of who we actually are. We are not shame, right? We are good people. And I hate using the word good, but like, right, we are honorable, respectful, respectable. We have dignity as humans, right? For the simple fact that we are human, that's it. All we need is to acknowledge that we are human and we deserve dignity. We deserve to cultivate dignity in ourselves. And so being able to rebuild that in the face of having felt shame, right, is to remind ourselves who we actually are. And part of that can also be feeling clean and righteous anger. Right? Nobody talks to me this way. Not even me. Right? Right? Like, no, clean, strong, fierce. No, I don't deserve to be shamed, even if it's coming from within. Like we joke, some of my friends and I joke, the call is coming from inside the house. And I also wanted to share that, where is it? I have it. Oh, here it is. This is my little box of shame. And a lot of people are like, oh, if you have shame, you need to like write it down, burn it, rip it up, bury it, throw it away. And the fact is, as I said earlier, right, we're not going to get rid of it. It's like it exists inside of us. To pretend that we could throw it away and get rid of it for good is sort of like a recipe for just anxiety and feeling unworthy because like, oh, but wait, I still have these thoughts, right? So my recommendation is you take some little pieces of paper and you write down the things that you've like. So for me, the 3 things are, I can even show you what it looks like, right? I'm a selfish, spoiled brat. I'm a pathetic loser and I'm bad. That's what it says on these little pieces of paper. And I just simply realized that it's actually no longer in here,
Yeah.
it's outside of me now. Right? And I can carry it with me. It's like, okay, yep, there it is. That's the shame, and that's okay. Rather than like some sort of grand, gesture of like, banish the shame for good. It's just not gonna happen.
Mhm.
I really appreciate that you showed us your shame box, and it made me think about what Jill said too, again, that really struck me, which was that getting it out there, whether it's putting it in the box, or as Jill had said, saying it. Because I don't know about anybody else, but it's like my experience when both of you spoke, your whatever that shame was, is just total love, right? Like, oh, these people are so beautiful, like, right? Like, and I'm guessing that that's, oftentimes, not always, of course, we have to be safe, when we're saying these things, or, who we say them to, but that, because, when you speak it, or, we hear it, we can see that's not you, right? We can see it as separate.
And I think it's important to be human and whole. And I think part of being human and whole means that we have feelings of shame, we have thoughts that aren't pretty, and that everybody does. And to pretend that that you don't, I mean, I'm like, somebody's gonna say, I have no shame, right? But like, sometimes it is so subtle, you wouldn't even know that that's what it was. Like, and I call that micro shaming. We micro shame ourselves, like, oh, stop being so ridiculous. You should be over that by now. Like those little kind of like shoulds, right? Which sounds like, it's not like, oh, you poor pathetic loser, right? Which sounds so much more like, oh my God, and heavy and whatever, versus don't be ridiculous, which sounds sort of almost funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many people do negative self-talk, like, oh, I'm an idiot, like if they make a mistake. And every time I'm present for that, I'm like, no, you're not. Like, take it back. You're really smart and brilliant. Because like, I mean, I believe that imprints on yourself. You're telling your brain you're stupid, or you're bad with money, or whatever. And then actually it'll start happening because you imprinted yourself with it. So there's, and like, even though we live in the world of like, self-care and like self-esteem boosting and all that, I hear more negative self-talk now than I've heard for years. And I don't know whether like there was a COVID hangover, people spent so much time by themselves, they were just with themselves, and like they didn't get mirrors to reflect that back. I mean, we all need mirrors, but like I sure wish negative self-talk like would go away instead of uptrending. But it makes me wonder like what's happening in our society that causes us to be even more judgmental now than previously. What's up with that?
Well, I have a belief that, like, when I said that we are whole, that means that we contain it all, right? We're not just positive. We are positive and negative. I actually have do I have it handy? Let's see if I can find it really quickly. I don't want to spend my time trying to find it, but like you're either this or you're this, right? You're good or you're bad. You're right or you're wrong. You're pretty or you're ugly. You're selfish or you're selfless. When in fact, it's like all of that is inside. Right. And so to me, it's when we can see and acknowledge, like, oh, look at me, I just realized I was thinking pathetic loser. Oh, look at me, I was just thinking I'm ridiculous, or I'm not good with money, or that I'm stupid, right? It's being, I think what helps it is calling it out in ourselves and loving ourselves through those moments, right? Like when we catch ourselves, rather than trying to think that we shouldn't do it at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's an opportunity to like turn it around and like acknowledge it, and then like like take it to a better direction. And
Yeah, like, I mean, a little kid, right, who's feeling whatever they're feeling, some sad, shameful, guilt, fear, we want to talk them out of it because it makes us uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so can we sit with ourselves and be like, oh God, yes, this is shame. This is what I'm feeling. I have my brain is, one of my favorite ways to deal with it is to say, my brain is offering me those thoughts. Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
I want to see if Farrah has anything, because I know, Farrah, you've got some places in your book where you talk about self-love. And just do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that it can be really difficult because shame is so natural, and it is very easy to shame yourself. And, we're talking about showing empathy and compassion to other people. And sometimes it can be very difficult to show that to yourself. When you talk about like micro shaming and these little comments, I know if I ever catch like a friend doing that to themselves, I'm pretty quick to be like, hey, I don't like how you're talking about my friend right now. Like, this is unkind and I don't like it. So please stop. And I'm pretty quick to do that, but it's more difficult at times, most of the time, to do that to myself. I think that can be really difficult. And Karen, I think some of the things that you're talking about, and it sounds like you have an incredible framework of managing shame. It takes a lot of bravery to really combat this and confront it. And I think that's really incredible to work through those steps and be able to manage in a healthy way. Really great.
I want to read something. It's a quote I saw a woman on TikTok of all places. And I just love this so much. And, you can sort of take the words here and apply them in whatever way makes sense to you. But she said, healing is not becoming the best version of yourself. Healing is letting the worst version of yourself be loved. So many of us have turned healing into becoming the super perfect version of ourselves. That is bondage. That is anxiety waiting to happen. Healing is saying that every single version of me deserves love, tenderness, and grace. When we get to a place where we can see and empathize with every version of ourselves, even the version of ourselves that we can sometimes be ashamed of, that's when we know we're walking on the path of healing. And the woman's name is Kobe Campbell, and she has letters after her name.
Okay. That's so
Linda,
lovely.
did you have something you wanted to? I saw your hand up, Linda.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of hard. It's funny because I wasn't come to this last month. I just didn't feel connected to it. And then last week, I had a half an hour sobbing session about shame. And hadn't even remembered that this was supposed to have happened last month. And I don't remember what triggered it, but it was all based on things that had happened when I was a child that I are so deeply rooted. And it can be a challenge because you think that you have walked some of that path to healing at least and understand shame or self-love or whatever. And yet there's still this very deeply rooted part of you from whenever it happened the first time. And I will share one part of it. When I was a very little girl, probably 8-ish, maybe younger, someone said to me in a moment of anger, get my ugly face out of there. And I heard that like a physical slap. And forever since then have struggled with the idea of beauty. And last week, for whatever reason, that came up for me. And I just lost it for at least a half an hour, just a ball on my bed, just crying. And luckily I have a wonderful husband who was able to just be with me. But it struck me so out of the blue, I hadn't seen it coming. But shame can be so deeply rooted that you don't even remember that it's there. And it wasn't until that process last week that I started to really recognize where some of that self-talk, those records that I play in my head, come from. And I've had it for such a long time, but only a couple of years ago did one of my daughters get it framed for me. There's a drawing of me when I was 5 that a neighbor did. And it sits now at the top of the stairs at our new home. So now I've taken 2 since last week, talking to her as I come and go up the stairs, and just bringing her a little of that healing from way back when. It's a process. Word, it's a process. Those records are those grooves are so deep on those records that it's really hard to.
And we disconnect, right? Like, of course you don't want to remember that. So we disconnect and like shove it away. So it makes sense.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I know that I've shared before with this group, but it's coming up again that you guys know my spiritual teacher does a recording and listening practice. So we'll hold the recorder in one hand and let that young person, let the shamed person, let the sad or the angry person say everything that she wants to say. And then we listen, really, really, really listen. And there's a disidentification that happens where we hear it as if it's that, a separate person in a way. And the response then comes, recording a response. And for me, this has been so powerful because it speaks to what you're all saying. It doesn't help to push it away, but it does seem to help to just offer love and to offer, whatever kind and gentle and compassionate words that want to come.
And like what Linda spoke to, I think everybody has these moments from childhood, and what our bodies do in those moments, that disconnection is brilliant, right? Like those, like we are also, another thing we tend to be ashamed of is our trauma responses, our survival responses, our stress responses, right? So disconnecting, dissociating, running away, even fighting, right? It's so funny. I heard somebody say, how did she put it? Like fight, flight, or flight has become panic, avoid, and numb. But yeah, like that's like, it's brilliant that we dissociate, right? Like those responses are what, if we were living out in the forest in 6,000 years ago, this would help us survive. Can I read something else?
Sure. Yeah, please.
So this is a piece that it seems to be sort of this ongoing piece, and I have called it my timeline of disconnection. And it's kind of heavy, but it ends really fun. So 1968. I'm standing at the blackboard in my first grade classroom after school, writing my numbers from 1 to 100. It's my punishment for calling one of my classmates a crybaby. My face feels hot and prickly. There's a pit in my stomach. I feel like I can't breathe. I want to disappear. I disconnect. I had felt the same exact way just a few days prior when my mother made me tell my stepfather in graphic detail about what I had done with some neighborhood kids in the woods. It was a you show me yours, I'll show you mine situation that went beyond showing to touching. I can barely get the words out because I'm crying so hard. I want to disappear. I disconnect from myself. That's why I was a few days later trying to offload that feeling onto my classmate. I get home from school that day and I stand in front of a mirror and I sneer at myself and say, I hate you, you're so ugly. And I scratch my face and I believe I am bad. 1969, I'm sitting alone at the dining room table. My mother is in the kitchen and my stepfather is standing in the doorway watching me. On my plate is a pile of cold lima beans congealed with margarine. I had ruined dinner because I refused to eat them. My parents coaxed and threatened and laughed and rolled their eyes at me and told me there were starving children in Africa who would be grateful to have my lima beans. I want to disappear. Finally, they lose their patience. Frustrated, my mother gets up to do the dishes. You'll sit there and you will eat them. And if you don't have them now, you'll have them for breakfast. With tears running down my face, I try to take a forkful and put it in my mouth. I chew a couple of times, try to swallow, and I gag it out of my mouth onto the plate. So now you'll have to eat that for breakfast, my stepfather says. And I believe I am a selfish, spoiled brat. I disconnect from myself. 1971. I'm scrambling to finish the extra chores I was given so I can raise the money to go on a school trip to Washington, D.C. It's the last day to make the payment and I haven't earned enough. As the minutes and hours tick forward, I'm desperate. I beg for more chores. Go get my slippers and I'll pay you 10 cents, my stepfather offers, and still it's not enough. I'm sure I'm not going to Washington, D.C. because I haven't earned it. I haven't worked hard enough. I must not want it. I want to disappear. And at the last minute, somebody says, okay, we'll chip in the last $1. And I believe I am a pathetic loser. I disconnect from myself. A Friday afternoon in 2001, I'm grocery shopping. Stop dancing in the aisles, a woman shouts, her teeth bared, her hands clenched at the two girls with her. The girls shrink. I lock eyes with an older gentleman as we navigate the crowded produce section, and I smile. He dances a little jig. May you always feel free to dance in the aisles, I say to him and to the girls, with a wink, who are watching behind their mother's back. He nods and smiles. Meanwhile, a young man turns to the woman with him and says, should I make a cobbler? She doesn't reply. I think the answer to that question is always yes, I say with a low voice and a smile. And thanks, he says, in an equally low voice. And I believe I am a joyful, intense, mischievous human. I show up and I connect. That's shame resilience.
So nice. It's very powerful, very empowering to have that ability.
And
how does that feel?
It feels amazing. Our stories are so full of both the shame and the moments of connection, which I adore watching Sherry do. She's always doing that. If you follow her on social media, right?
Oh.
Do you know what I'm talking about, Sherry?
No, I was waiting to see if you'd say a little more. I was like,
right, like you go up to strangers and you say, dance with me in Spain, or tell me what you love about your life to the waiter or the guy who owns the restaurant or whatever. I mean, there's just been so many of them.
Thank you.
I love the way you interrupted the pattern and changed the course. You just changed so much, Karen. I felt that so deeply. It's so beautiful. Thank you.
I know I was still kind of just lingering in it. That was a powerful piece, to really feel.
But I don't know. I mean, wouldn't you all say maybe not exactly those situations, but similar?
Yeah.
Did you want to say any more, Kate, or just yeah?
Well, yeah, I definitely feel that the opposite of shame a lot of times, and that's true in my rather obnoxious childhood self as well, is to be audacious, is to be outrageous, is to dare to do something and really mean it. And so, it was really great about the grocery scene was the gentleman, the man in the aisle with you, who winked, and you were able to pick up on that and to find an ally and to, take that risk. And I think sometimes that whole idea of shaming is, as you both said, is limiting self. And so, as Jill was saying too, instead of limiting, expand and do it in a really powerful, fun, exciting, daring, way. So I love that.
Yeah. The another piece of my process that I'm developing and have been doing personally, and it's so funny that you should say audacity, is what I call self-concept work. So we have these shaming messages and that we've sort of developed and created over time, and they've become imprinted on us and we believe them. And rat is so like, yes, we can have our shame box, right? And we take it out of us. What do we, I can't say replace them with, but like if we are able to make room for something else, if we take it out, what can we put in? And again, it's mining our stories. And I guess as writers, right, this is really important, or I think it's, for anybody who likes to tell stories, our stories have so much wisdom in them. And when we look, we can find, even in everyday life, what is not necessarily the opposite, but like, what do I want to replace it? So I have an easy way to do this is to sort of remember a time when, and maybe we could just do this exercise right now, is like, remember a time when you were like just totally in the flow of your life and like in your authentic you-ness, right? And doing something where you're just like, I could do this all day long. This feels so good. And like, what was happening? Who are you with? And if you could call that feeling something, what would you call it? And then sort of looking at what qualities, traits, or values can uphold that feeling. And so when I've been doing this practice now for 4 years. I call mine elemental power, and it's upheld by 3 pillars: dignity, expression, and audacity. There's that word. Each of them feels very different. And I have stories, memories, images, bits of phrases, words. And this is what it looks like. It's a piece of paper. That when I think them or I remember them, and one of them is the grocery store scene, right? It's like, oh yeah, that was audacious, right? And all I have to do is remember the grocery store scene, and then I feel that, and then I go and I can say, do I want to use this as my fuel today? Or maybe I want to use dignity, right? Or maybe there's a situation, like I had a situation with my mom last summer where all of a sudden something happened and it was like, all right, it's time for dignity.
Wow.
Right. And how can I drop myself in there? What do I need to remember about myself to drop myself in? So these are all tools, things I've been playing with for the past few years, and creating this sort of new process, I guess, or structure, or I don't know what you call it, framework.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for bringing all of this in. I just want to ask Farrah, just before we still have a few minutes to see also, Farrah, was there anything else? Like, I know we've covered so many different topics, and I just was wondering, is there anything that's coming up for you that you wanted to join in?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think. Like, yeah, I think a lot of the things that Karen is talking about are just really empowering. And I think it can be, like I said before, just like so difficult to do some of this work and confront these topics that are so terrible in many ways. I mean, sometimes when you think about shame, it may be rooted in some of, the worst things that have ever happened to you. And that can be very difficult, of course, to confront. And so I just really admire anyone who has the bravery to really confront that and move forward. So I think that it's just very powerful. And I hope that it feels empowering. Like when Karen was talking about kind of breaking that cycle, and I asked, like, how did that feel? You know, like, I hope that feels good, you know? And yeah, so I think that can be very positive, you know, just like Karen said, like to end with a little bit of levity. And yeah, I think it's just very admirable to do that work, and should be very empowering.
Well, I'm really curious, Farrah, though, for you, because you're like, as you know, to make it a mission to be raising girls or children, not just girls, right? To be in this new world. It's not a new world, but like, you know what I mean?
Feels like it.
But you know, that also requires shame resilience and bravery. You know, you're there, you're doing it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's gosh, it's definitely difficult, but I think what can be powerful sometimes about parenting is that you have the power to kind of like form their world. And so when things are important to you and you don't want to raise your children to be ashamed of things that are not shameful, then you have the power to do that. And that can be really encouraging. And that definitely motivates me, just seeing my kids feeling good about being their authentic selves. You know, sometimes it personally took me a very long time to be my authentic self. And so to empower children to do that feels good. It does feel good.
Farrah, you just touched on something that I'm so glad you did, which was that one of the quotes from your book was that we are raising the future. And you said, if we want to make the future a kinder, more just place for our children to grow old, we need to do everything in our power to make it so. And it feels to me like that kind of ties in like all the beautiful pieces that Karen has brought and everything that you brought and everyone who's here, which is that, you know, that idea of what are we doing, you know, about this. And I know, you know, I wish we had a whole nother hour because I know there's so much more that we could say with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Karen, we just have 1 minute left before we go. And I know this is, you know, something that you're just like so immersed in right now and teaching and is there anything in this last minute, like maybe something that you want to send us off with, a final thought?
Yeah, something that just popped in, and it's, again, I don't know who said it, but I made note of it and I really liked it. And it's, some things can be healed and some things need to be mourned. That's what came into my head.
You know what? I love that so much. Thank you for being present to catch that when it just dropped in. That's so beautiful. Something for us all to just take away and really, you know, look at and sit with. And that went so fast. I loved this conversation. I feel like there was so much in here. I'm deeply grateful to Karen and Farrah for bringing everything. I know you guys really prepared for this conversation, and I so appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who's here, to those of you who shared. This is just beautiful. You know, so much honesty, vulnerability. And I feel like this is part of what really does combat that shame. You know, just all of us in it together, nodding our heads the whole way through. Like, yeah, you know, I feel that too. Me too. I know that place. So thank you so much. And thank you, Mango, our whole Mango.
Yes, thank you.
Mwah. We love you. We're so grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sherry.
Bye.
Thank you, Sherry and Karen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.